Are they lying or are they just ignorant when it comes to retirement planning? I don't know. The end result is negative. It's the same result though. The end thing is the same result. People read this stuff and they get scared or they get led down a road that is leads them to blackness, a fear of, oh my goodness, it wasn't ever like this. And I don't know if it's by lies or by ignorance. In fact, it doesn't matter. It's kind of like a certain group of people here in Atlanta who basically mandated you do this, and if you don't do that, you can't live your day-to-day lives. Now, were they lying when they said the benefits of doing this, or were they ignorant? Well, I don't know. It matters not because many people did this because of what that certain group in Atlanta was recommending based on bad information. The end result was still people are going to get hurt because of that. And the same thing here. My man Luis sent this to me, and it friggin' pisses me off. There's no excuse for people in my industry not to be able to see this, but not only just see this, but to manipulate it. To manipulate. I'm like, why? Because this is blatant manipulation. Now, it might be by ignorance. Well, I'm telling you, I'll show you because you're like, you really have to pierce through this, but it's easy. If you've been around as long as I have, you say, oh, yeah, I get that. So when my man Luis sent this to me, and Luis is no fool. He's a freaking a high-ranking officer in the Marine Corps. Now, I know Marine Corps, we gotta slow down when we talk to these people. Even an E4 light infantryman can still say, oh, yeah, I get that, where I got to kind of say, look, man, I know you're in the Marines. I know you're an officer. Let me just back it up for you. Just totally goofing. At least he knows a couple of things about things. So let's just put it that way. Point being is, it's easy to overlook this unless you've been around the block like I have. And I want to show you, this friggin' ticks me off. I'm my darndest not to indict the guys who wrote this article. I don't like to punch down. This is just punching down. I like to punch up. But we're going to read this here. Estimates vary on the amount of workers once covered by pensions. But according to data from Boston College, I was like, oh, Boston College, okay, good. I'm familiar with BC's Center for Retirement Research. Around 88% of Americans employed in the private sector had defined benefit plans in 1975. And then they say this graph right here. I said, and I was looking at this right before I went night-night, so I just gave it a quick look. I said, I can't wait to kill this article tomorrow because something's not right here, because I know for a fact that 88% of private sector employees did not have pensions in 1975. That's freaking stupid. But I'm seeing this. I said, okay, someone's gone off the reservation. And here's our chart. Percent of workers with defined benefit pensions by sector, 1975 versus 2005. So here's private sector employees. This group here is saying 88% of these people had, if you're employed in the private sector, basically 9 out of 10 people had pensions. That's what they're saying. And then in 2005, only 1 out of 3 had pensions. I said, that's not right. There's something wrong here. And then they cite the Boston College Center for Retirement Research. And I said, okay, let's take a look. So I look, you always got to go to the source, man. And then first thing I opened up first, I said, what, this is from 2007. I said, man, you guys, people who wrote this article haven't updated this because there's lots of detail. And I said, I know this isn't true. I'm not sure quite what they're getting at because I've studied this until I'm blue in the face, man. I wrote a book on this whole thing. And I said, this is wrong. And then I very quickly was able to ascertain what the error was. It's like you gotta be a seasoned vet to see how bad people are manipulating. And this is blatant manipulation here. They manipulate this data. They didn't just copy and paste it. And that's what makes me think that this is a blatant lie, because they had to manipulate. They had to change this. Because look, you'll notice percent of workers with defined benefit pensions by sector. Source, Boston College Center for Retirement Research, this article right here. But notice what their very own article says. Percent of workers with pension coverage with defined benefit plans. You see the difference? I hope you do. Percent of workers with defined benefit pensions. Percent of workers with pension coverage with defined benefit plans. That is significantly different. They're saying if you had a pension coverage as a private sector worker in 1975, 88% of the people who had a pension coverage had a defined benefit plan. That's a hell of a lot different than saying 88% of the people of workers had defined benefit plans, because we know for a fact that's a falsehood. It's a lie. It's a lie. 88% of private sector workers did not have defined benefit plans in 1975. We'd never had more than 50%, ever. The whole reason we had ERISA to begin with, right here, which you talk about Employee Retirement Income Security Act, was because pensions were going bankrupt. That's why we had the ERISA to begin with. Let's just read this more. In the old days, the nature of pension coverage in the public and private sector was similar. In both sectors, the overwhelming majority of those who had pensions were covered by defined benefit plans. So basically, if you had a pension, you were covered by a defined benefit plan. But some, 12% of the people who had a pension, were not covered by DB plans. They were covered by a different type of plan. Maybe it's defined contribution. Maybe it was a rabbi trust, deferred comp. Maybe it's company-owned life insurance. The vast majority of people who had pensions were covered by defined benefit plans. But it wasn't the vast majority of people had pensions to begin with. We know for a fact the majority to the vast, slowly becoming the vast majority of people late in the 70s had no defined benefit plans, no pensions anymore, because corporate America couldn't afford them. They're going bankrupt, which is why ERISA came to be in the first place. Let me show you what I'm talking about. You can read from page 90 of my book, You Can Retire on Social Security, and I got tons of, just tons upon tons of links that you can look up yourself. But Josh, people had more pensions back then, back in the 60s and 70s. Well, people had access to pensions. More people did in the private sector. That's correct. But the majority of private sector workers never had access to pensions, even in the heyday of the 1960s. And that's a fact. And even of the workers with access, how many stay at their jobs long enough to actually get the pension benefit? Would you rather be the guy who is owned by his company and goes there every day for 30 years to manufacture widgets in order to potentially have the benefit of a pension, or someone today without a pension but with more vibrant economy and more freedom to engage in whatever you want, i.e. to roll your 401k over so you can start the business, which is exactly what I do. All right, so let me show you something else here. I talked about this article not that long ago. Annie Nova, Aldo Nova. Yes, I said only Nova I know is Joe Nova, but people, you don't know Aldo Nova? I said, yeah, I do remember Aldo Nova from the 1982 or something like that. And here's right here: share of households by birth year with access to a traditional pension. I mean, so if you're born in 1940, 53, that means you'd be 1940 right there. You'd be, by 1975, you'd be 35 years old. Only 58% of the people had access to a traditional pension. All right, if you were born in 1945, and right here, if you were born in 1950, that means by 1975, you're 25 years old. Only 37% of the people had access to a traditional pension. You can see, if you were born in 1923, 68% of you had access to a traditional pension. So by 1975, that was, you were, I mean, how old were you? 60, 62? I mean, it's so stupid to say that 88% of the people had access to a traditional pension. And this is a traditional pension, not even a defined benefit plan. I'm talking a traditional pension. And what the CRC, Center for Retirement Research, says from Boston College is that if you had access to a pension, 88% of you had a defined benefit plan. So why are these guys doing this? I don't get it. I don't understand. And let me just read the rest of this article. So I read that whole article, and it's something about lattes, and if you don't have a latte every day, you can have a house. And the guy who wrote the article was criticizing that. The whole thing bores me. Just like whatever. So there's a guy who wrote a book on what happened to the American dream. We're spending too much on lattes, and you'll never be able to retire unless you quit your lattes. And the guy who wrote this article that I just criticizing said, no, that's not true. It's not as easy as giving up a latte. Oh, it just bores me to death. This is what Republicans follow the Democrats. The false premise is what you're arguing. I don't argue the premise that there is Americans' dream is gone. I don't argue. I won't debate that because it's not true. I don't give that any credence. The American dream is still alive and well. If you don't want to take it, that's your choice, man. It's kind of like you don't want to love God, you don't have to. God doesn't force you to love him. He still loves you. It's like C.S. Lewis says, when you get up to the pearly gates, God says, thy will be done. And you will go away from the pearly gates, not because of God banishing you, but because you banished yourself. If you want to banish yourself into a fear about retirement and American dreams gone, it's not fair. I used to be able to afford a house and a car and one income and all that. By all means, do so. I'm not here to challenge that. You got to be you. For me, I'm like, dude, I get it. There's lots of reasons to be negative. You freaking live in the best country that's ever been in mankind. Ever. And you know that's because all the people want to get here. A lot of these people don't want to get here just to get welfare benefits. Yeah, some do. I get it. Hell, look at all the Native Americans, not American Indians, but Native Americans who live here on welfare benefits because they don't want to work. I mean, it is that simple. There's always going to be people who want to get by without any labor. I get it. That's probably not you. It's certainly not me. I'd like to work. I'd like to do things to advance my cause. And if that means I got to go 4 years in light infantry, I'm going to go 4 years in light infantry. So save up enough money to go to college. If that means I got to go dig ditches over here, I'll go dig ditches over there. You'll do the same thing. But the fear that's peddled, like, oh no, you got to keep going to your cube or else you'll never retire. It's so freaking stupid. It's so boring, and I'm sick of it. But I'll keep fighting the fight because someone's got to hear this, and as more and more people hear it, maybe they can free themselves from the corporate mania that says you better keep working, you better get this, you better be follow our multi-gendered lingo and all this stuff, and how dare you pray to Allah or God or Jesus or Abrahamic religions. Or whoever how dare you? That's discriminatory. And of course, I'll never say that about any other religion other than Christian, but we know. How dare you say that marriage, blah, blah, blah. You see what I'm saying? You're like, okay, but everybody else can say this, but I can't. Yes, because you want your job. And if you don't have your job, you'll never retire. And so my whole point is to try to get people removed from that. And the way you get removed from that is one thing only, pay down your debt. It's just that simple. All right, love to hear your comments. Thanks, Luis, for sending this to me. Silliness. Silly is as silly does. Not Luis, but the idiots who manipulated the graph. They deliberately changed it because they're either ignorant, they don't know, or they're purposely manipulating it. I'm not sure. Both ends of the same conclusion.